In a shocking twist, a doctor has accidentally exposed Seth Rollins' private X-ray results, confirming a devastating knee injury that will sideline him for 9 months, forcing him to miss WWE SummerSlam 2025. Could this be the end of the Visionary's in-ring career? This video breaks down everything you need to know about Seth Rollins' injury, what the leaked report reveals, and how this could shake the WWE universe. Don't miss the full analysis. 1 minute ago, the unthinkable happened. A single image, an X-ray scan never meant for public eyes, was mistakenly uploaded to an unsecured portal. And just like that, the entire WWE universe learned the truth. Seth Rollins is out. Not just for SummerSlam. Not just for a few weeks. 9 months, or possibly longer. A torn meniscus. Ligament damage. Internal swelling. And a surgeon's grim warning, if he returns too early, it could end everything. The man known as the Visionary now faces a future full of uncertainty. And for the first time in years, the roar of the crowd may fall silent, because the body behind the spectacle is breaking down. But how did this happen? Why wasn't it caught sooner? And what does this mean for Seth Rollins' legacy, his family, and his future in WWE? Before we answer those questions, one truth must be said. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. It began as a routine follow-up. For days after Rollins took a stiff landing during his match against Gunther on Monday Night Raw, medical staff at WWE's private clinic in Orlando performed a precautionary scan. No alarms were sounded that night. Seth had walked out of the arena on his own power. He even joked with security, wincing slightly, but brushing it off. "Just needs ice," he reportedly said. But insiders say that joke masked something far more serious. One nurse, who later came forward under the condition of anonymity, recalled Seth sitting in the clinic's waiting room with one hand clenched tightly around his knee, whispering under his breath, "It's not right. I've felt this before." That sentence sent chills down the spine of anyone who knows his medical history. Seth Rollins has been here before. Torn ACL. MCL reconstruction. Months of rehab. Back then, he came back stronger. Hungrier. More determined. But now? The stakes are different. He's older. He's a father. He's a champion. And this time, the damage is worse. The turning point came at 11:13 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. A routine X-ray image, filed under Seth's legal name, Colby Lopez, was accidentally uploaded to a shared cloud drive linked to an external imaging contractor. For 12 minutes, the file sat in an open-access folder before being spotted by a wrestling blog intern who had been scouring metadata for story leads. They clicked. They saw it. And the moment they realized what it was, they took a screenshot. The damage was undeniable. Even to an untrained eye, the X-ray revealed advanced tissue separation, multiple stress fractures, and cartilage loss in the medial knee compartment. One radiologist, contacted independently by a wrestling podcast, said bluntly, "Whoever this is, they shouldn't be walking, let alone wrestling." Within hours, the image had gone viral. The name Seth Rollins was trending worldwide. And backstage, silence fell across the locker room. One source close to the medical team admitted, "We weren't ready for it to come out like that. We hadn't even had time to tell Seth yet." By that evening, WWE's chief ringside physician, Dr. Hayden Cross, issued a statement, reluctantly. "Yes, the image is real. Yes, the injury is serious. We were planning a structured announcement once Mr. Lopez had reviewed all options, including surgery. Unfortunately, due to this unintentional breach, we must confirm that he has sustained a multi-ligament injury requiring long-term recovery. Based on initial prognosis, the timeline is approximately 9 months. 9 months. That takes us past WrestleMania. Past Survivor Series. Past the prime of a performer many considered untouchable. And just like that, the Visionary's future was thrown into chaos. He didn't find out from WWE. He didn't even find out from his doctor. He found out from Becky. According to multiple backstage witnesses, Becky Lynch had just finished a light training session at the Performance Center when her phone buzzed. The thumbnail preview showed a grayed-out scan. The headline? "Is this the end of Seth Rollins' in-ring career?" She clicked it. Froze. Then stormed out without a word. Seth was in a conference room 2 floors down when she entered. The door slammed. Voices rose. Security was instructed not to interfere. But one staff member outside the door heard a phrase repeated several times. "Why didn't they tell me? I gave everything. This wasn't the plan." When Seth emerged, his face was pale. His hand shook as he held a printed copy of the scan. He was heard saying to his agent, "You know what this means. They're going to write me off." Immediately, creative plans were scrapped. The long-hyped SummerSlam title match was pulled from internal listings. Production schedules were shifted. Travel was cancelled. But it wasn't just business. It was personal. For the WWE Universe, Rollins was never just another superstar. He was the architect of the Shield. The one who carried Raw when others walked out. The man who took every bump, sold every move, and pushed his body beyond breaking. And now his body had broken back. One backstage writer described the mood as funeral-like. Not because Seth had died, but because something in WWE had. The feeling of invincibility. According to leaked medical memos, the scan showed the following. Grade 3 MCL tear. Lateral meniscus damage, with fraying. Osteochondral lesion, bone bruise. Signs of chronic inflammation from years of repeated trauma. A former orthopedic surgeon, not affiliated with WWE, explained. This isn't just a fresh injury. It's cumulative. Years of wear, layered with a sudden trauma. The X-ray shows degeneration that's been ignored for a while. The fact that he was still competing at this level is astonishing. Is Seth Rollins' career on pause or permanently altered? Behind closed doors, WWE executives are said to be divided. Some want to build a grand return narrative, the comeback of the Visionary, a 2026 Royal Rumble re-entry, even a surprise WrestleMania redemption arc. Others aren't so optimistic. One unnamed executive, quoted by a journalist under condition of anonymity, said bluntly, "He may never wrestle full-time again." At some point, you stop being an athlete and start being a liability. But what about Seth? What does he want? In the days following the leak, Rollins released a single statement on his Instagram story. "It's not over. But it hurts more than I expected." The caption appeared over a photo of his knee, wrapped, elevated, surrounded by ice packs. A child's drawing from his daughter Rue was taped to the wall behind it. Sources close to the family say Seth is struggling. Not just with the pain. But with the silence. With the absence of rhythm. With waking up and not hearing the buzz of arena prep or feeling the weight of his gear bag. He feels empty, one friend said. Like the music stopped. While Seth recovers physically, Becky Lynch is reportedly dealing with her own emotional spiral. She's cancelled 2 media appearances. She's refused to discuss the injury on air. And during a live taping of a podcast, when asked about SummerSlam, she simply replied, "There won't be a SummerSlam without him." Friends say she's angry. Angry at the system. At the doctors. At the accident. But mostly, at fate. She knows how much Seth gave. And she can't understand why it had to happen now. The current treatment plan reportedly includes full surgical reconstruction of the MCL and meniscus, 12 weeks of non-weight-bearing recovery, 16 weeks of physical therapy, emotional counseling for post-trauma athletic depression. Whether Seth Rollins returns in 9 months, or ever, remains uncertain. But what's clear is that he's now entered the most painful chapter of his storied career. Not one fought in the ring. But one fought in silence, in solitude, and in the echo chamber of what if. In the sterile white confines of an undisclosed rehabilitation center outside Tampa, Seth Rollins sat in silence, his leg elevated and encased in a custom-molded brace. The swelling had gone down, but the pain hadn't. Not fully. Not mentally. The doctors came in and out, checking vitals, adjusting ice packs, reminding him about inflammation, range of motion, and rehab milestones. But none of it seemed to register. Not the words. Not the concern. Only the silence. The absence of music. Of footsteps backstage. Of the tension before pyro. The kind of silence that feels like the world has already moved on without you. For Seth, recovery wasn't just about the knee, it was about identity. In WWE, his every step had meaning. His strut down the ramp. His knee strikes. His signature stomp that thrilled crowds and sealed matches. Now, even the act of standing up required assistance. The man once called the architect found himself relying on others to navigate a room. And that sense of dependency, of weakness, was more suffocating than the brace around his leg. Becky visited daily. Sometimes with Rue. Sometimes alone. She brought small things, notes from fans, a handmade bracelet, even the infamous red sunglasses he wore during his 2015 heel run. She cracked jokes. She teased him about finally taking a break. But behind every smile was something raw. And when she thought he was asleep, she'd sit quietly in the chair beside him, eyes fixed on his leg, and her breath would catch in her throat as if daring it to move. To twitch. To promise that things would return to the way they were. But there were no promises. Only probabilities. And even those were grim. Behind the scenes, WWE had gone into full damage control. Marketing pulled Seth Rollins from every promotional poster. His merchandise was quietly discounted. The SummerSlam promotional package was re-edit. Originally, it featured a dramatic face-off between Rollins and Gunther, but now, it was a generic Summer of Champions montage. Internally, officials debated how to address the leak, with some arguing that the doctor responsible should be terminated, while others insisted it was a systemic failure in data handling. Privately, some felt relief that the truth was out. That fans finally understood just how much Rollins had been working through. Because while the injury might have appeared sudden, it was anything but. Trainers had noticed the signs for months. Stiffness. Slower warm-ups. Occasional limps after matches. But Seth had waved it off each time, telling them he could push through. And he had, until he couldn't. What few people knew was that the injury had begun forming during WrestleMania. In the closing minutes of his match against Cody Rhodes, Seth had landed awkwardly on a springboard knee strike. Cameras didn't catch it. Fans didn't notice. But he had. Backstage, he'd winced while unwrapping his gear. And when a ringside doctor asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said, "Just tweaked it. Nothing new." He iced it, took ibuprofen, and moved on. Because that's what professionals do. But professionalism is not invincibility. It's just delayed damage. When the news broke about the 9-month recovery, several former WWE superstars reached out privately. Some posted public tributes, brief, heartfelt messages acknowledging Seth's contributions. Edge tweeted a simple line, "The ring will wait, brother. Heal strong." Others, like Kevin Owens, sent gifts. A box of Canadian snacks. A handwritten note. "You saved the locker room more times than anyone knows. It's your turn to rest." Yet amidst the outpouring of support, a darker conversation began to swirl, one that no one wanted to confront, but everyone feared. What if this is the beginning of the end? Not because Seth couldn't recover, but because some damage, especially to identity, isn't reversible. In the sports medicine community, what happened to Seth was being labeled a catastrophic overuse collapse. Not a single devastating injury, but an accumulation of thousands of micro-tears, concussive impacts, and ignored warning signs. Doctors described it like a bridge slowly crumbling after years of unchecked strain. By the time anyone hears the crack, the steel is already broken. Seth's injury was now part of medical symposiums, case studies, training lectures. How to identify hidden damage in elite athletes. How to spot the warning signs that even the toughest performers hide. And in every PowerPoint slide, in every whispered clinical debrief, his X-ray hovered like a ghost over every discussion. But to Seth, this wasn't academic. It was personal. It was pain. In therapy sessions, he struggled with more than just physical goals. The emotional work was harder. He had to reframe his relationship with movement, with performance, with self-worth. One therapist asked him to describe who he was without wrestling. He sat in silence for almost 4 full minutes before replying, "I don't know." He wasn't being dramatic. He was being honest. Because for 20 years, Seth Rollins wasn't just a persona. It was the way he existed. The gear. The chants. The feeling of a live mic in his hand. The crowd singing his theme at full volume. The choreography of violence. It was his vocabulary. His blood language. And now the stage was gone. Back in Stamford, a few WWE producers began quietly drafting contingency plans. Plans for commentary work. For backstage interviews. For legacy storylines that would honor Seth's career should he choose to step away from in-ring competition for good. No decisions were made. No contracts changed. But the very fact that those conversations were happening said more than anyone publicly dared to say. Meanwhile, fans began rallying in unexpected ways. A fan-led movement dubbed #SeeYouAtRumble took off on social media, encouraging others to post their favorite Rollins moments in anticipation of a hopeful Royal Rumble return. The hashtag trended for 3 days. Compilation videos flooded TikTok. One showed a montage of Seth's greatest stomps, ending with a quiet image of the leaked X-ray and the words, "Not the end. Just the pause." That video was shown to Seth by his physiotherapist. He watched it twice. The first time, he didn't react. The second time, his eyes welled. He didn't say anything. But when the therapist asked him what he was thinking, he whispered, "I miss it. More than I can explain." One evening, as Becky prepared to leave the rehab center for the night, Seth called her back. She turned at the door, expecting another request for water or medication. Instead, he looked up from his bed and said, "What if they replace me?" It wasn't a joke. It was fear. Raw, primal fear. Becky walked back, took his hand, and said, "You're not a slot to be filled, Seth. You're a story. You're the story." Still, his mind churned. The WWE had always been about moments, but moments move fast. There were already whispers of Gunther facing Bronson Reed at SummerSlam. Rumors that Damian Priest might cash in his title opportunity and fill the vacuum Seth had left behind. A new feud. A new chant. A new champion. That's the business. And Seth knew it better than anyone. But knowing it doesn't make it easier. Especially when you're on the outside, watching the circus continue, and you're not on the marquee anymore. At night, he dreamed of the ring. But the dreams were distorted. The ropes were too far away. The mat was water. His boots were filled with sand. Every step felt like drowning. He told his therapist about them. She said they were common. Grief dreams. A mourning of lost power. Because even if Seth Rollins returns, he'll never be quite the same. Not physically. Not psychologically. The body can heal. But the fear of re-injury? It lingers. Every landing becomes a question mark. Every leap, a dare. And that's what separates wrestlers from ordinary people. The courage to keep leaping anyway. But the question hanging in the air now is, will Seth Rollins still have that courage 9 months from now? Or will the voice in his head, the one he's never shown to fans, never confessed in interviews, finally get louder than the crowd? Back at the clinic, the days blurred together. Ice. Stretch. Rest. Repeat. The leg began to respond, but slowly. A centimeter more motion. A few seconds less pain. It wasn't a comeback. Not yet. But it was motion. Then, one morning, the physical therapist entered the room and found something new. Seth was standing. Without the walker. Unsteady. Shaky. But standing. He looked at her and said, "I want to walk across the room." Alone. She nodded. No fanfare. No speech. Just a quiet, mutual understanding. It took him 2 minutes to cross 10 feet. But when he got there, he smiled. Not the smirk. Not the character. But a real one. A first crack of light through the storm cloud. Because even if the road ahead is long, even if the spotlight is dimmed, even if the crowd moves on, Seth Rollins isn't ready to be written off. Not yet. Not like this. The moment Seth crossed that room unassisted was quietly logged in his medical chart as first independent mobility attempt, successful. To the staff, it was a milestone. To Seth, it was a whisper. A whisper from his body that perhaps it wasn't ready to give up on him just yet. But while his muscles trembled and his ligaments adjusted, his mind remained at war. The days were slow. Measured. Painfully repetitive. He hated the stillness. Hated the way minutes stretched into hours, the way every ceiling tile above his hospital bed felt like a reminder of what he wasn't doing. He used to measure time in matches. Now he measured it in therapy appointments and ice pack rotations. The echo of the crowd had faded. All that remained was the low hum of medical machinery and the occasional knock of a nurse checking vitals. But something else began to shift. Seth, the performer, began to fade just enough to let Colby Lopez breathe again. For years, the lines between the two identities had blurred. Seth was the one who delivered the speeches, the slams, the stares down the lens. Colby was the man who took the pain home. Who soaked his knees in ice after every match. Who read bedtime stories to Rue on nights when his voice cracked from shouting promos. Now that Seth was absent, Colby sat with silence, and in that silence, he began to hear himself again. He started journaling. Not as therapy, not at first. Just to pass time. But over the days, those entries turned from notes about pain to reflections about purpose. What wrestling had given him. What it had taken. What it had cost. He wrote about the night he won the WWE Championship. The way the belt felt heavier than expected. The way the roar of the crowd had masked a dull ache in his right knee, the same knee that now screamed every time he stood. He wrote about Dean Ambrose. About Roman. About the Shield and the betrayal that built his name. About how lonely it all felt when the lights turned off. He wrote about being a father. About Becky's unwavering presence. About the guilt of watching her carry both their weight while he remained confined. He described her as a lighthouse in a storm he didn't realize he was drowning in. And he wrote about fear. Not just of pain. But of absence. Of being forgotten. Out.